Hey everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and today I want to go over something that came out about Supreme Leader Snoke. That seems to have a lot of people in this big kerfuffle, if that is that the word, I don't know. But really it's a new piece of information that's coming out from a new book called the Star Wars book, which is essentially just, it's a book filled with interesting little factoids, just something that you could use for trivia, I suppose. But it actually does give some new information about Snoke, specifically one tiny little thing left in one sentence that kind of changes a lot of aspects about what people maybe thought they knew about Snoke, because as we all know, Snoke, introduced in The Force Awakens, was like this really mysterious figure, and all these theories and all these ideas about what he could be and where he could have come from and how this all happened built for several years, and then he was killed in The Last Jedi, and we were essentially left with almost no answers at all, like nothing about who is this guy, and then he died. And then of course in The Rise of Skywalker we found out, well, here's what we find out. We see Snoke, a couple of Snokes, like 3 Snokes, in a giant vat together, seemingly clones. And then we hear Palpatine say, "I made Snoke." And that's it. That's all we get about Snoke. So we still have a lot of questions. Now, the truth is, you can go look at his Wikipedia page today, and there's actually a lot of information there. And I think if you actually read that full thing, everything appears to make sense. The problem, I think, is that, that all makes sense today, but over the course of the last several years, we've gotten several times seemingly contradictory information, and it kind of just leads to this idea that maybe, especially with Snoke, it seems, they did not know the full picture of what was going to happen here. So let's go ahead and dive in. There is this website here, which I found really interesting. This person, Josh, back in March of 2019, he wrote everything we know about Supreme Leader Snoke so far. Okay, and now this is of course before, the whole vat and the clones and Palpatine, I made Snoke, all that stuff. And he actually collects a bunch of stuff here, but I do want to read you just a couple of things. So if you want to, kind of follow along about what we knew, you can go read this. But here's some very specific things I want to read you about. Okay. So this is a quote from The Force Awakens novelization, okay? And the important thing to know about novelizations before you take all this at face value is that sometimes novelizations use parts of an earlier draft of a script, okay? Virtually in every single movie. In fact, I would say 99.9% of movies, scripts are constantly being rewritten. Okay, there's like the final draft is only when they're done filming, then the script is done, or even when they're done filming pickups, then the script is technically finished, because even though they have like, okay, this is the draft we're going to start filming with, things are constantly being cut or added, or just speeches are changed or altered. But this is a quote from the novelization, and novelizations sometimes use earlier drafts. Also, novelizations, of course, do have additions that just the writers of the novels added in. Although you do have to assume that Disney Lucasfilm was okay with these additions being added if they were added in by the writers, that they were okay with the writers saying this. So either way, it would seem that these quotes would have to have, at least at some level, a layer of officiality granted by Lucasfilm. So here's the quote from The Force Awakens, okay? It says, "Kylo Ren," this is Snoke talking, "Kylo Ren, I watched the Galactic Empire rise and then fall. The gullible prattle on about the triumph of truth and justice, of individualism and free will," and basically he just goes on this whole speech about, the fall of the Empire. But the important takeaway is, I watched the Galactic Empire rise and then fall. So that is something we got really early on. Obviously this was Force Awakens novelization, and that was like a really key clue that a lot of people back then used for all their theories about Snoke, about what's happening there. Another thing I wanted to show you guys was this bit from the Last Jedi novelization, okay? And again, same rules apply. Maybe some of this was in an early draft of the script, maybe some of this was just made up by the writer, Jason Fry, of the novelization, but either way, there has to have been some level of Lucasfilm saying, yeah, you can put that in. So that's why we're going to read this. It says right here, this is part of the quote, Snoke had learned that lesson many years ago when he was young and the galaxy was very different. So it's just talking about how like the Jedi and the Sith and all this other stuff. But yeah, just basically that idea. When he was young and the galaxy was very different. And the important thing about this quote specifically is that this is not Snoke talking. The other quote about watching the Empire rise and then fall, that was Snoke talking to Kylo. So that could always be taken as like, oh, maybe he was lying. You know, maybe he was just completely making it up and telling his apprentice like, oh, I'm super old and I saw all this stuff, when he didn't. But this is a narrative description. This is, you know, because let's read up to here. Right here, whether Jedi, Sith, or some other sect less celebrated by history, all those who used the Force to explore possible timelines kept that uppermost in their minds. Those who didn't died regretting that they hadn't. Snoke had learned that lesson many years ago when he was young and the galaxy was different. So it's not him talking. This is just a narrative like description of what's happening in that scene. So that this is the writer, this is the story itself telling you that Snoke was once young and the galaxy was very different many years ago. Now, again, of course, you know, if you can say, oh, well, maybe Snoke was made 25 years before Force Awakens, you know, because it's still possible, right? Palpatine was still an Exegol. They could have made him, and you could say, well, 25 is many years ago, I guess, when the galaxy was very different. I guess. I don't know how young he would have been, but whatever. Anyways, so there's interesting quotes there that were given us. We were given information through the novelizations, and basically at this point in time, people were kind of just trying to figure out anything they could about Snoke. And some of it seems to have been kind of contradictory. So the next thing I want to read you, before we really get into what the book said, because I haven't actually told you guys what the book said yet, that gotten everyone into this kerfuffle, I want to read some other entries from the Rise of Skywalker novelization, because there's some other interesting little tidbits, and basically what we're doing here is we're kind of just going over the changing story, because at different points in time, it appears that Lucasfilm had different ideas about what they wanted Snoke to be, what they wanted the whole situation to be, and then, you know, one movie comes out and the whole story changes, and then the next movie comes out and they're like, okay, we have to change the story again, so that stuff we said before doesn't really make sense anymore. But anyways, let's keep on reading. So this was the Rise of Skywalker visual dictionary, so this should be like the latest up-to-date thing, but let's read what it says, okay? The coming of a supreme leader. In time, Imperial era leaders like Grand Admiral Ray Sloan, General Brendel Hux, and Allegiance General Pride would make way for the rise of Supreme Leader Snoke, heir apparent to the contingency crafted by Emperor Palpatine before his demise. Snoke gave no indication as to his origins, but possessed the knowledge and force ability that made him undisputed heir. Strangely, he made no designs on the old title of Emperor, and his force abilities were not explicitly of the Sith heritage that Palpatine embodied as Darth Sidious. Snoke seemed content to focus on spiritual matters, ceding control of the military to generals and the shaping of the First Order's public image to propaganda masterminds. Some, like Pride, came to peer behind the veil and realize that Snoke himself was subservient to an unseen force. Okay, so this entry, especially this last sentence right here, you know, like if you say that he's subservient to an unseen force, it would then seem strange to suggest, which we'll see in a second, that he was unaware of that unseen force, or even if that's possible, he must have been, if he's subservient to that force. But we're gonna get to that point. So I just wanted you guys to see that. And here is one more entry, also from the Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary. And this is kind of like, this is just going to go over like the basically what they're saying the plan was, in universe, what the in universe plan was. We know that in actual world, the plan was always changing. So here we go. The Supreme Leader is dead. Snoke's entire existence has been built for this moment. Okay, so that's quite a statement. Literally, the whole reason Snoke existed was to be the final test for Kylo Ren. That's what they're saying. The Supreme Leader has tested Ren's worthiness as a disciple, and unbeknownst to all, does that include Snoke? I don't know. His capacity to inherit the Sith legacy. Snoke is no Sith, but his role has been designed by the Sith Eternal Cultist to act as a final crucible, to groom and mold Ren into a master not only of attack but also cunning. Ren uses Snoke's reliance on reading his every thought, twisting it to his own advantage. Kylo outmaneuvers Snoke in an encounter engineered to misdirect the Supreme Leader's attention, and slays him, bisecting him with the Skywalker lightsaber. Okay, and also this interesting tidbit here. It's pointing to his eye. It's like singular focus imposed by his unseen master. Okay, so again, his unseen master. And then this entry saying he's subservient to an unseen force. It seems to at least leave the implication to me that he knows that he's serving Palpatine, right? Or that he knows that Palpatine's behind everything. Like he knows his role in all of this. And also they're saying his entire existence has been built for this one moment. But it's like, so all that other stuff about seeing the rise and fall of the Empire, about, you know, many years ago when he was young, it's like, does this all still fit together? I don't know necessarily. The plan seems to be changing. Okay, and finally we get here. This is the big thing that seems to have everyone up in an uproar. So here we go. We're gonna go ahead and just read the whole thing. It's not a lot. And this is from the Star Wars book, so it's just little factoids about each character, I guess. For much of its history, the First Order lurks in the shadowy edges of the unknown regions. Its leader is a towering humanoid with a broken build, a scarred being known only as Snoke. Though a Force user of impressive power, he denies any Sith lineage. In fact, only scant details exist regarding his origins. It's possible Snoke himself may not know his true nature. Okay, so, you know, before the Visual Dictionary was saying he's subservient to an unseen force, you know, he's you know, all that stuff. But now they're saying it's possible that he doesn't know. That's interesting. Snoke is a strand cast, an artificial genetic construct concocted by the resurrected Darth Sidious to be his proxy in power. Snoke has free will, but his actions and goals are still orchestrated by Sidious. Now, some people were saying that was that line doesn't make any sense. I think, you know, it's about being literal. You know, like his actions and goals are still orchestrated by Sidious. I think really what they're saying is like Sidious planned on him being the leader of the First Order, and he planned on Kylo Ren killing him. Snoke senses the coming of Rey as an awakening in the Force. He's disappointed by First Order leader Kylo Ren's inability to stop her. He goads Ren all to push the darkness in him. Snoke, who's ordinarily extremely cognizant of Ren's thoughts and motives, doesn't foresee that Ren will outmaneuver him. Through Snoke, Sidious sidesteps the tradition of a darkside apprentice slaying his master to ascend, which happens when Kylo Ren betrays Snoke and slices him in two. Now, again, they were saying that his entire existence was built for like that moment, right? That one moment to like really push Ren full dark side. And they're saying that was the whole point of Snoke. That's why he was created. Ren then assumes the mantle of Supreme Leader of the First Order. Ren's examination of Snoke's past turns up more mysteries and dead ends. Ren fully expects the dark voice that he has heard in his head for years to disappear once Snoke dies, but it persists. This points to someone manipulating Snoke, and Ren's search for answers uncovers the presence of the Emperor, who was believed deceased on Exegol. There, in a laboratory deep in the Sith sanctuary, are other Snoke bodies resting in nutrient fluid. So, we still have many questions, but basically what we're learning now is that Snoke, Snoke has free will, or he had free will, but I don't know, I guess his position as the supreme leader and him targeting Kylo was somehow orchestrated by Palpatine, maybe more in a suggestive way than a literal control, because I think a lot of people were just under the impression that Palpatine was literally controlling him like a puppet, like literally, like he's like a VR system, he's controlling his avatar. But no, it seems that Snoke did at least have some layer of free will, and I guess at this point it's like Star Wars retcons things all the time. They always have. If you go look at the prequels and the Clone Wars and a lot of the stuff that happened before the Clone Wars cartoon show and after it, and there's a lot of retconning going on. But here we're dealing with a situation where it's one particular character that they just did not seem to know what to do with. And what I'm about to read is from The Rise of Kylo Ren, which again presents us with seemingly contradicting information, because the Rise of Kylo Ren, especially this issue here, I think this comes from issue 1 or 2. I think this one comes from issue 1 and this one comes from issue 2. I think that's what happened. I think issue 1 or both actually might have come out right before the release of The Rise of Skywalker. This came out and everyone's like, oh, this is going to be significant about Snoke, and immediately it seems to be contradictory, because basically Kylo Ren arrives on this planet and he meets Snoke, and he immediately says, Snoke, or here, let's zoom in a little bit here. He says, Snoke, look what Master Luke did to you. And I guess he's just talking about his face, right? And he says, never mind that, my young Ben. Let us consider what he nearly did to you. Okay, so what we can infer from this is that before Ben seeing Snoke here, Snoke didn't look like that. That's at least the inference, because he's like, whoa, look what Luke did to you. And he's like, oh, don't worry about that. But of course, that doesn't match up with what we see in the movie, because all of these clones in this vat still look like the fully damaged Snoke that we see. So right away, seemingly contradictions. And then of course he up here in the next issue would say, I was not born Snoke, I became Snoke. And I think that is also what kind of led to people thinking that Palpatine was literally controlling him, as in he literally became Snoke. But then if Snoke had free will, it's like, so what's happening here? What is this situation? Why is he wearing these clothes? So it's funny that we between the novelizations of both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi suggesting one thing, the Rise of Skywalker just saying no, he was created in a vat, he's just like some kind of meat puppet. But now it's like, no, he had free will. It seems that there's still room for them. I think there's still like a little bit of wiggle room for them to try to make all of this make a little bit of sense. I don't know how you make sense of this part where he's like, look what Luke did to you, but it's like he looks just like the rest of his clones, or maybe those clones were made after to look like the damaged Snoke. I don't know. What's the deal with them? I think there is still some wiggle room for them to try to make this all make sense, and it's a mess, and I think that's my main thing, is that, like, people can dogpile on the sequels all day long. They can talk about how there wasn't a plan and they didn't know which direction they were going, and I think there is at least a fair amount of that is true, and it is deserved to, like, okay, it is true that they didn't exactly know where they were going, right? But Snoke, I think, is the standout character that fully exemplifies they really didn't know what to do with him. I'm not here to like blame it on one director or the other director or what movie didn't get made, or because there's no telling behind the scenes. Whatever you think the story is in your mind, like, oh, it's Ryan's fault, or oh, it's JJ's fault, the story behind the scenes could be completely different. It could be someone else entirely is the reason that this is so weird and strange. The truth is, Star Wars retcons itself all the time. You know, the next little factual book could say something completely different about Snoke, and now that's the current canon. You know, and I think that's the other thing about this, is that canon is always going to be changing, you know. So even though we have these like really strange entries of you know, he watched the Galactic Empire rise and fall, at one point in time that probably was the idea, and then it changed, you know, and that's just kind of the way it is. And I know that's frustrating for some people, but I mean, it is what it is, really. My thing is, even though I think I can get past this, you know, like I'm okay with them going back, writing a full novel, trying to explain Snoke and trying to tie all of these things together. You know, why did he lie to Kylo about seeing the Empire rise and fall? You know, and also, but I didn't even mention this, but there's also some kind of mention of him maybe having trained another person before Kylo Ren, I think, because one thing used like a plural, like he had apprentices, and so it's a whole thing. Anyways, I thought this was interesting. Let me know what you guys think, because it's kind of unavoidable that there have been some contradictions here as to what the plan was at what point in time. Force Awakens, Last Jedi, after the Rise of Skywalker, after the visual dictionary, before the Rise of Kylo Ren comic book. It's clear that the plan for what was going to happen with Snoke and what his backstory is kept on changing, and even today he's kind of this big question mark. But again, at the end of the day, right now at least, you can go read his Wikipedia. It all kind of makes sense when you read it all together like this, the way that it's laid out here. But you definitely do have to kind of just, you know, just gloss over you just have to gloss over some contradicting things that we've heard in the past about this character. So anyways, let me know what you guys think. Does this really bother you? Is this frustrating beyond belief? Or are you fine with it and you're just like, I'll read the novel whenever they finally decide what they want the backstory to be. Alright, I'll see you guys on the next episode. Bye.